Hello and thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Kokomlemle on digital address GA 0992539. Our leading stories this hour. Minority Leader in Parliament Haruna Idrisu pushes for punishment of government officials involved in the Ejapa royalty deal. As it emerges from the special prosecutor, there were illegalities in the transaction. We bring you highlights as we take you to Parliament where the debate is raging. What do anti-corruption campaigners think? We'll hear them too. Also coming up, education and health tops the list of a survey conducted by the National Commission on Civic Education as to what will influence the voting of Ghanaians on election day. We take you through the survey and ask if it does resonate with you. And the pulse is brought to you by Global Communities Dignilu, affordable, safe sanitation. Join us on DSTV 421, GoTV 144. Remember, we're streaming live on YouTube and also on Facebook. You can catch us there. Your thoughts are welcome on 0540109009. My name is Gifty Andopia. This is the pulse. Please, as always, be my guest. Minority Leader in Parliament Haruna Idrisu is pushing for punishment for government officials involved in the Ejapa royalty deal after the special prosecutor concluded there were illegalities in the transaction. A corruption risk assessment report by the special prosecutor concludes that there was a breach in the Public Procurement Act and Public Financial Management Act in how the transaction advisors were procured. He says the process raised reasonable suspicion of, quote, bid rigging and corruption. There is more in this report.
The report discloses the identity of Imara Corporate Finance Limited of South Africa as one of the transaction advisors. The report notes the processes that led to the procurement of the firm should have gone to Parliament because it's an international transaction. That was never done. Secondly, the whole of the fees for the bid purportedly won by Imara of South Africa with its decoy Data Bank of Ghana is to be paid in US dollars to Imara Corporate Finance Limited of South Africa. The mandate agreement does not say when and how the decoy Data Bank of Ghana was to be paid by Imara for a contract purportedly won and performed jointly. This opaque arrangement in the contract negotiation process is what made the analysis by the Office of the Special Prosecutor conclude that there is a reasonable suspicion of bid rigging and corruption activity, including the potential for illicit financial flows and money laundering in the arrangement of fees payable to Data Bank of Ghana as the decoy, which was not approved under the Public Procurement Authority Act. The transaction advisors nonetheless went ahead to identify and recommend service providers and underwriters to the Ministry of Finance for appointment by the Republic of Ghana. The ministry acted contrary to the Public Procurement Act and the Public Financial Management Act in delegating the power to appoint service providers to the unlawfully appointed transaction advisors. The transaction advisors, whose selection and appointment by the Finance Ministry did not measure up favorably to the analysis of risks of corruption and anti-corruption assessments, were potentially susceptible to undue influence, favoritism, cronyism, nepotism, and all forms of discrimination abhorred under the 1992 Constitution, leading to the suspected packing of the service providers and underwriters' position with entitlements not chosen on merit.
Well, my colleague Joseph Akable will be joining us shortly for that. But if you have been following this, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about the actions that have been taken by the presidency, the actions that have been taken also by the finance ministry? The minority leader, by the way, has been speaking. He says someone must be punished for this.
Cannot remedy the defects of the transaction in any way possible. That is why we question the transaction. In any case, what is government desperately looking for $500 million for? What do they want the money for? What is the national need? What is the emergency? for which we must borrow. From a transaction that we earn without borrowing, gold contributes 4% to our national revenue. Government without Ajapa earns $130 million annually from gold revenue, and just 10 of the mineral mining companies make significant contribution to our total revenue. Parliament cannot remedy the defects so identified by the special prosecutor. How is Parliament going to cure nepotism and cronyism? How is Parliament going to cure that you appointed a chief executive without due process? How is Parliament going to cure that you pass a resolution on a non-existing law? You don't build a house on nothing. It was built on nothing. So how is Parliament going to cure that a motion is moved and the motion is amended at the very time it was to be adopted, to make room to wait for a president to assent to a bill so passed by Parliament? We feel strongly vindicated. The truth must always stand with the political minority at all times, and Ghanaians will now understand why momentarily I lost my cool and temperament for an important national matter of this character and nature. You find a minister of state trivialize it with Papano at that time, not concerned about the weight and magnitude of this particular transaction. You want to take gold revenue for the next 10, 15 years. What does that mean to the state? What does it mean to chiefs and people who earn a portion of the Mineral Development Fund? Government ministers were joking and reduced that transaction to a trifle.
So that are you calling for it to be totally scrapped, suspended? What is your call as a minority leader?
The minority is not likely to change its position on Ajapa. We don't.
Well, what then will the minority do? I'll tell you who else has been responding to these issues. The finance minister. He's been responding to this special prosecutor's risk assessment performed on this transaction. My colleague Joseph Akable joins me right now. He will help us understand what the finance minister's response has been. Joseph, let's start with what he has to say about the involvement of Data Bank.
And so first, he makes the point that he is a co-founder of Data Bank, which has been in existence for some 30 years and is a leading investment bank here in Ghana. He says that it has won several awards, including the best brokerage company in Ghana. And Data Bank has been actively involved in virtually every initial public offering of state enterprises here in Ghana. He goes on to make the point that sometime in 2014, he resigned and has since then not played an active role in the management of Data Bank. So he said, I resigned as executive chair of Data Bank in August 2012 and resigned from all Data Bank boards in February of 2014. And so he makes the point that since then, he has not held any position as Data Bank and has not been involved in any transaction that has seen Data Bank play an active role in terms of winning government contracts. Yet he says that through all governments, they played a key role and they have won many of such contracts as a result of the kind of work that they do, being a leading investment firm.
So essentially, he talks about Data Bank's, track record, and then he talks about the fact that he himself is no longer involved in the day-to-day activities of this bank. But we also know that the point was made in a report about breach of procurement laws that have led to the inclusion of Data Bank, and that there were certain processes that had to be undergone, which wasn't before Data Bank was included. Tell us about that.
In fact, the first part of it has to do with the fact that when approval was sought from the Public Procurement Authority, the SP says that approval was to ask for an international company to be brought on board to serve as transaction advisors. The special prosecutor says after the approval was obtained, the ministry now writes to the foreign companies asking them to submit their bids, and in that request, they are being told that they will find favor if they have a local collaborator. Now, the SP makes the point that within the window of communicating that to the companies after obtaining approval from the PPA, it was a short window, and so it meant that a lot of the American companies that were unable to find local partners were disqualified from the agreement. And he says this was what he says amounts to more of an insider trading of the sorts to ensure that someone is favored unduly. Now, the finance minister in his response makes reference to the Public Procurement Act and argues that the stipulation in there calls for the bids to come in to collaborate with local firms or present a consortium to bid for contracts. He says it's not alien or offensive to the procurement practice or procurement act. He goes on to say that following an evaluation which took place sometime on 12 January 2018 of the technical proposal submitted by the two sets of firms by a duly constituted evaluation panel, Imara/Data Bank emerged the winners. And so the point he's making is that one, it is a case that you are saying that when the approval was sought, it didn't include a local component. Says that is not alien to the PPA and it's not offensive to the PPA law, as contrary to what Mr. Amidu says. And he goes on to make the point that even after they had requested that they submit those bids to the local collaborators, it went through a rigorous process, and Data Bank and Imara, for that matter, were selected to act as transaction advisors. And so on that score, he disagrees with the point being made by the special prosecutor as well.
So, Joseph, let me just quickly break this down a little bit if I can. So, in the conclusion of this particular report, Mr. Martin Amidu, the special prosecutor, lists some $15,000 per month payable quarterly in advance to this company you refer to, Imara. And then there is also a fixed success fee of $4 million. I assume that based on our knowledge of the PPA's procedures, that this is the reason why Imara, for example, which is a foreign company, had to go through the PPA. Help me if I'm correct.
And so, yes, and so the concern that the special prosecutor had was the fact that he says the arrangement was such that it appeared to be the case that it was actually Data Bank that was doing the work. Okay. And so it was more or less an opaque arrangement that you want to get the money to Data Bank, but you bought on some Imara somewhere that they are passing the money through them to make the payments. But again, the finance minister responds by saying that it's a case that Imara was the one that was selected, and the requirement was that it will be good enough if they have local collaborators and they're able to get those local collaborators on board. And so he disagrees with Mr. Amidu's claim over there. And he again goes on to make the point that in terms of the arrangement as to how Imara will be paying Data Bank for the service that will be provided, it's not an issue that the finance ministry should concern itself about. And so the finance ministry has signed an agreement to pay a certain amount over a certain 12-month period to Imara. And so as to what Imara does with that amount of money and how it pays Data Bank, it's not an issue that the finance ministry is concerned with.
Joseph, thank you very much for helping us understand. So this is the perspective, or this is the response coming from the finance minister to the concerns raised by the special prosecutor. Well, the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu, says they feel vindicated. He says Parliament cannot cure the defect raised by the special prosecutor.
Parliament cannot remedy the defects as captured in the conclusions of the special prosecutor. I should commend the special prosecutor for doing a diligent work on the corruption risk analysis of this particular transaction. How is Parliament going to remedy breaches to the Public Financial Management Act? How is Parliament going to remedy breaches to the Public Procurement Act and its accompanying amendment? How is Parliament going to remedy payments made to Imara, which has a decoy company of Data Bank? How is Parliament going to remedy that? So I do not see the NDC minority ever supporting anything Ajapa. I want to be convinced that is worthy building a national consensus on, and that will be premised on three important issues. One, what are you borrowing the money for? What did you need 500 million or 1 billion for? Why are you monetizing gold royalties when you can leave the same royalties and benefit from it annually with $130 million US, noting that it makes a significant contribution of 4% to your national revenue and just a contribution of 10 mining companies. Now, traditional authorities and traditional communities will lose out because they benefit from the Mineral Development Fund. What assurance are we giving those traditional communities? Then, more importantly, risk of corruption. The whole transaction is in darkness. Who gets punished for it? this is a litmus test for Nana Addo Dankwa on his.
So your position is that the president must do more
to fighting. Yeah, he must do more than
he should prosecute people.
He must take responsibility. He must take full responsibility for it.
You want to free criminals
and not hide behind Parliament. All those actions of breaches, all those actions of failures, all those actions which is not in the public interest and national interest were executive decisions of the president.
Well, what does the majority side in the House think? Majority Leader Osei Mensah Bonsu says no decision can be taken on the way forward until the referral gets to Parliament, and he's referring to President Akufo-Addo's referral of this particular transaction to Parliament. The Majority Leader describes as preposterous claims that Parliament did not do a good job on the original agreement in the first place.
That doesn't mean that whatever Parliament or any Parliament anywhere in the world does is sacrosanct. There's no Parliament anywhere in the world that is beyond reproach, right? Especially given our own circumstance when we don't have experts to independently consult to give us their opinion about that, right? And we must be working to improve that in order for us to improve the quality of our own positions on matters. We are not experts. All of us are not experts in the various fields. It's important that we are able to engage consultants and experts, and we don't take whatever comes from government as a given, right? So we must work to improve the conduct of business in the House, right? That one, yes, I agree. But for anybody to say that, oh, we didn't do good work, we had 4 hours, that's not true.
And one of the specifics, Martin Amidu sides with the position that, for example, the special purpose vehicle shouldn't have been in a tax haven, and that it amounts to putting the sovereignty of Ghana beneath that of the said special purpose vehicle in Japan. That's a point that the minority has canvassed, but he repeats that point that Parliament shouldn't have allowed the situation of the establishment of a special purpose vehicle as a government entity outside. How do you respond to Mr. Amidu on that concern, for example?
The law that came, I mean, we shouldn't just be hypocritical. This law was first passed when? 2018, under whose regime? President Mahama. Did it contain a special purpose vehicle? Did it?
It did.
And what was the terms of the structure of that special purpose vehicle?
Some say the amendment that was done in 2020 gave it more leverage.
What leverage? There was only one special purpose vehicle that law allowed. What was done was to open the vistas and allow many more special purpose vehicles to be created.
Majority Leader Osei Mensah Bonsu there. We can speak to Adam Senano. He is with the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. Mr. Senano, thank you for your time and good afternoon to you. Let's begin with what you think should happen going forward. I mean, this is a debate or conversation that you've followed since I think yesterday or so. So I believe that you're very much aware of the direction it is taking. Help us from your perspective, what you think should happen.
Well, thank you, Millicent. I mean, the line has not been very clear, but I mean, the feedback from Parliament is interesting. It suggests that the referral to Parliament in itself may suffer various challenges because of the position taken by the majority and the minority. And so we may need to take a second look. The president may need to take a second look at that, because the feedback from the minority saying they are not going to support anything Ejapa contrasts with the also with the majority leader saying that what Parliament does is sacrosanct. By implication, there is no space for Parliament to redo something it has looked at. And so I'm a bit intrigued as to how this is going to proceed. I would have assumed that Parliament would embrace it and take a second look at it. But what we are hearing suggests that the parties there have a different perspective on the president's reassignment of this thing to their quarters.
I just want to find out, do the perspectives, or to what extent does it matter, the perspectives of the opposing sides in Parliament? Because the special prosecutor is emphatic in his report that laws have been breached. I mean, once laws are breached, I mean, these are laws, these are constitutional provisions that should guide the way we behave. So if the special prosecutor is emphatic that laws have been breached, monies have been expended, why should it go back to Parliament?
Well, so you are putting the question to the president. As far as I see, the laws that have been breached require an investigative body to establish who's breached the law. If they have breached the law, they should be taken through the legal processes, found culpable, and sanctioned accordingly. And so, yes, that must happen simultaneously with any attempt to cure any mistakes that have been made. Having said that, there is also the issue of the fact that the president has made a certain, given a certain instruction, and one wants to look at whether it's going to deliver the results that we are all looking at. So yes, there are two major issues arising. One simply being the fact that there are breaches of the law that have to be dealt with, and obviously the SPO is suggesting that the necessary agencies should take that up and follow through.
The finance minister has put in some response, which my colleague Joseph Akable took us through. He says that it's not offensive if data banks involvement. First of all, he talks about he resigning from the bank, as in stepping aside from the bank. He talks about the track record of this bank. I mean, when it comes to the finance industry here in Ghana. And then he talks about the fact that he is not involved in the day-to-day activities of the bank, even though he is finance minister. So again, he responds and says, even though the data bank has something to do with this particular transaction, it doesn't offend the Public Procurement Act in any way. For you, what does this response stand in the scheme of affairs?
Well, I think that, to be fair to the finance minister, this is not the first time that this issue has come up. And I think that it will be going on slippery ground if we every time somebody has worked with an organization and moves on, would like to target as a potential conflict of interest position. I think that we need to allow Data Bank to continue to exist as an entity providing jobs, and if it legitimately, what needs to be established was the process queued. And I think that's where the issue of whether Data Bank was part of the initial listing and eventually was brought on board, etc., that is the loophole that ought to be addressed. Was that legit? But otherwise, I don't think that one should tag the finance minister because a former entity with which he worked or even established has gotten this opportunity, especially if the competencies and the experience is there.
Away from the competences and the experience that he may have, the argument would be, and has always been, couldn't we, this is a whole sovereign country, have found any other entity that could have done the same work, given the background that the finance minister himself has obviously interests in Data Bank, irrespective of the track record, irrespective of the fact that he has resigned? Because you are an anti-corruption campaigner. The mere perception of corruption is a big problem that we're trying to deal with.
No, I think that it's unfair to say that we know obviously that he has an interest. I mean,
he has an interest as in his relationship with the bank. I mean, even though you step aside, I mean, I think we will be just kidding ourselves if we say that just because someone resigned from something that they started, that they wouldn't have any connection. They wouldn't have any affinity.
I think that would still be unfair. Okay. I think we need to make sure that systems and regulations work. So the question really put properly is, the Data Bank put in a bid for this?
Okay.
Were they qualified? Did the system of the process to do the selection and screen down, the criteria, were they followed? They did justify their inclusion. One needs to examine the documentation on the process to then see whether or not they were justifiably included and finally selected to play this role. Okay. If any of those steps were breached, then you have a comment to make. Otherwise, if you have one or two individuals who have been very active in different organizations and moved on into government, and even have, as it were, resigned, taking out their interest and stepped off, those entities will not be in a position to continue business, especially if their business depends a lot on government. And that would be very unfair to those legal entities. So I don't think that that is the way to go. What we should do is to check the process. If any of the aspects of the process was not followed through accurately, fairly, then we have something to say about that.
For you, a little bit of the special prosecutor's report. Essentially, he raises issue of what he calls reasonable suspicion of bid rigging and corruption activity. He talked about the involvement of foreign currency, in this transaction, which essentially means that parliamentary approval was needed, but which was not sought. He talks about the involvement of data bank, which he addresses extensively, then some payments already made. He at some point indicates that Imara, which is the company involved in this transaction, is an opaque surrogate of Ministry of Finance and Data Bank Financial Service. Do these amount to substantive grounds to bring in the issue of corruption and conflict of interest?
Well, yes. I mean, when the Special Prosecutor's Office raises these issues in a report, they ought to be taken seriously. And so that's where the follow-through investigations to establish as a matter of fact. So you say Imara is an opaque branch, so to speak.
He says an opaque surrogate of the Ministry of Finance and Data Bank Financial Service. That
is an accusation, and ideally it should have been supported with specifics. And because it is opaque, one can't tell. So it means that additional investigation to establish, is this an entity that has existed long ago, who set it up, etc. The further findings on that aspect of it will prove whether the Special Prosecutor has given us an accurate description of what the situation is. But nevertheless, it tells us that in its current form, with the current process followed, there are major issues that need to be dealt with. And absolutely, one needs to reconsider what you do moving forward on a deal like this.
And finally, sorry that I cut you there. But finally, moving on with what to do, the minority in Parliament are saying that is saying someone has to be punished. The government officials involved in this transaction ought to be punished. There are calls for prosecution on the back of this. Are we there yet?
Well, yes, to the extent that one can establish that there have been breaches of the law, let people stand accused of what they have done wrong. And so one needs to start from the initial stages of this proposal right through to how we go to Parliament and to its approvals. And to, following the SP's report, establish who has been culpable in breaching the law, and let them stand and face the courts and the prosecutorial processes of the land. So yes, rather than take it as if there's one person, it obviously means that there are a chain of people who have breached the law at some point, and those people must be held accountable for whatever has been done amiss.
And always the issue has been who takes the next move. I'm wondering if organizations like your own, anti-graft organizations like your own, this is something you find interesting to follow, perhaps push for these prosecutions they are calling for.
Well, I think that on a further reading of the documents, we will then know what action to take. In the first instance, we were part of the group that insisted that we wanted more information, more consultation must happen. This deal shouldn't go forward because we didn't have we're not comfortable with the calculations to date. We're not comfortable with the arrangements. And so this SP's report actually vindicates what we're saying, except to say also that in the initial discussions, there was some uniqueness of the proposal that found as innovative. And if we could still think through how that could be of benefit to the people of Ghana, that would be useful.
Adam, I'll say very big thanks to you. Many thanks for your time joining us this afternoon. Edem Senanu is with the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. He's actually the co-chair. Thank you very much. And like he's saying, there are enough grounds, for further actions to be taken. Who takes that? He says his organization would want to take a look at the report and take further steps. I'll take you through some, information that's just coming in right now from the Special Prosecutor's Office. This is titled report on response to the report on the analysis of the risk corruption. It goes on and on, that title. And it says that the special prosecutor read last night a press release signed by Mr. Eugene Ahin, the communications director of the Jubilee House, which contains statements which are inconsistent with the press statement issued by this office, that's the Special Prosecutor's Office, on the morning of 2nd November, which is yesterday, on the above matter. And it says that the Office of the Prosecutor feels the need to clarify these issues for purposes of accuracy and truthfulness. He goes on to say that Mr. Eugene Ahin's statement from the accompanying email was issued around 2100 hours, that's 9 o'clock. And I had explained in this office's press statement of yesterday as follows. So he states what he had written earlier. And then, okay, let me see if I can read that just for our background. It says the analysis of the risk of corruption and anti-corruption assessment was completed and signed by the Special Prosecutor on 15th of October 2020. The Special Prosecutor, in a letter with reference number, he states it, dated 16th October, conveyed the conclusion and observations of the anti-corruption assessment to His Excellency, the President and the Honorable Minister of Finance as a matter of courtesy before informing the public. So that is a statement from the previous reports that Mr. Amidu published. So he goes on in this particular response to Eugene Ahin's communication that His Excellency the President offered to give me a copy of the alleged comment of the Honorable Minister of the Finance to this office's letter with reference dated 16th October, which I politely refused to take because one could not make comment on conclusions and observations of a letter which did not constitute the full report. Now, just to explain a little bit of that, the Office of the Prosecutor or the Special Prosecutor is saying that in reference to a statement issued yesterday by Mr. Eugene Ahin, he, Mr. Martin Amidu, received or was offered to be given a copy of what he is calling alleged comment by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Ken Oforiatta. But then he said he refused to take that letter, and his reason is stated there. He says it is because one could not make comment on conclusions and observations of a letter which did not constitute the full report. He goes on to say that I also wanted to preserve the independence of this office as an anti-corruption agency, which does not take instructions on the performance of the anti-corruption functions of the office. How could anybody think that a 13-page letter with a reference number constitutes a full assessment report of such an important transaction affecting a most important extractive national resource, which is the patrimony of the chiefs and people of Ghana and generations unborn? The reaction to the full report vindicates my caution. And it's a 2-page letter that Mr. Amidu put together. Let me see if I can add a bit more information before we wrap up from there. He says, I forwarded the completed 64-page report signed by the Special Prosecutor and dated 15th October to His Excellency the President, and the cover of letter with reference number, he states it, which was signed and received at the presidency at 12:04 p.m. And he has all those minute details to it, 12:04 p.m. I forwarded the same completed 64-page report to the Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament and the cover of letter with reference number, which is stated as well, and copied the majority and minority leaders, which were received at 1:04 p.m. So the Office of the President received theirs at 12:04, and the Parliament majority and minority leaders received them theirs at 1:04 p.m. I beg your pardon. So at 1:19 p.m. for the majority leader, and at 1:19 for the majority leader, and at 1:19 for the minority leader. I also forwarded the same report to the Minister of Finance, and the cover of letter with reference, he states, is also of even date, which was received at 12:15 p.m. The comment, he says, by the Honorable Minister of Finance, which I was aware of on Sunday, 1st November 2020, could not, therefore, be comment to the 64-page report I forwarded to the persons named herein. I do not intend to be patronized, as the special prosecutor, as Mr. Eugene Ahin appears to have conveyed by the statement issued under his hand. Analysis of the risk of corruption and anti-corruption assessment are serious anti-corruption tool with very serious consequences for any country dedicated to fighting corruption and making corruption a high-risk enterprise. He says the 64-page report was analyzed and assessed professionally and referenced with detailed analysis of the risk corruption and anti-corruption assessment of the Ejapa royalties transactions, from which no one can just pick and choose what he wants. The documents and the facts are real and were not manufactured by the special prosecutor. Finally, Mr. Amidu says the office of the special prosecutor was either seriously intended to prevent and fight corruption or was only intended as a showpiece to be trivialized. The 64-page report must be taken seriously to make corruption a very high-risk venture in Ghana. You see it signed right there in blue ink. Martin ABK Amidu, special prosecutor. Essentially, he's saying that the response from the finance minister seems to have been made not on the 64-page report that he submitted to the office of the president as well as to the parliament. He says that the result of this particular assessment ought to be taken seriously, essentially saying that the response doesn't cover everything that his report has highlighted. That's still watching The Pulse with me, Gifty Ando Apia. What do you think of what is going on with the Ejapa deal? I'd love to hear from you and share your comments with the rest of the world. The number is 0540109009. That's 0540109009. This is your country. It is your gold. Let me hear from you. I'll be right back from this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. Well, it's just 34 days to election 2020. John Mahama, the flag bearer for the NDC, is renewing calls for a one-on-one debate with President Akufo-Addo over both their records in government. The Akufo-Addo campaign has rejected earlier requests from the former president regarding a similar engagement, saying it is unnecessary. But addressing the people of the Medina constituency, John Mahama said the debate will help interrogate what government has used the over 141 billion cedi of loans it has contracted for.
And so, Yabobusia 141 billion a year. Nebusane said, Medina Quine, Yaye, Debbie, Medina Jom, Yaye, Debbie, Medina Gottes, Yaye, Debbie, and so toi, and Jim Medina for and say Omunioma. What Yansha Efien Naya, Mebeyo Mampini, any Efien Naya, Nana Kufa Dubai. Efien Naya, Mebeye or Mampini, Yajebosia 56 billion Ghana cedis. And then Nanado Ajebosia 141 billion Ghana cedis. Ezu Enti Ankamese Menen Entinaho. Now on tre ni odi 141 billion edi aye. Na mesto mentre ni amede 56 billion edi aye. 56 billion aye. Metro Kwame Nkrumah interchange. Metro Kaswa interchange. Metro University of Ghana Medical Center. Metro Ga East Hospital. Metro Shai Osudoku Hospital. Metro new expanded Tema Port. Metro Terminal 3 Kotoka International Airport. Metro asphalting of Medina town roads. Metro KJTR market. Metro Home Market. Atosu Market, Tampo Market, Tamale Teaching Hospital, Upper West Regional Hospital. Ezu na ono sontra ho 141 billion Ghana cedis. Yanka Sotiha, what do I hear? Where's the hospital back home? There be. Where's the school back home? There be. Where's the airport? There be. Where's the Jom? There be. Where's the harbor? There be. And then out there.
My colleague Manuel Kranting is on the ground with the team and he's joining me with some more. Hello, Manuel. Manuel, I'm hoping that you do hear me. Where are you at the moment?
We are currently in the Adentan constituency where the former president has been interacting with some of the electorates within the constituency. Well, we started off today from the palace of the Medina Key. We have the Medina Lorry Park where he made some promises to the people, especially within the context of his free Tibet training and so on. Quite critically, we've been talking about the Japan deal, which has been referred back to Parliament, to make the point that the president is shielding the finance the data bank might have mentioned in that particular report from the Hospital Prosecutor. There's an interesting thing also that the NDC has added to its campaigning just starting today, and that is a bit of education of the electorate on how to cast their ballots to minimize the number of sport ballots that are registered on election day. So just keep me, these are the few things that we've been seeing today on the campaign trail.
The places that he's been, I mean, the last time I spoke to you here on the show, he was in Ponkatamanso, which of course is a stronghold of the NDC. Adenta, by the way, is pretty interesting. Adenta is a swing constituency, and they're giving it to the MPP and NDC. How was he received there this time around?
Well, just like you're saying, Adenta is one of the battleground constituencies within the Greater Accra region. The former president has been making the point that they might have lost the seat in the 2015 election because of the fact that the party was not united ahead of that particular election. He's been calling on all the party faithfuls within the constituency and also some other electorates within Spain to come together and support the party's parliamentary candidate, Mohamed Adamu Ramadan, ahead of the December election.
Well, thank you very much, Manuel. Parliamentary candidate for the area, by the way, is a lawyer, Xavier Sosu, there. Manuel Kranting with an update for us. Let me tell you about the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. He says a change of government in Ghana's history has always reversed the country's development agenda. Dr. Bawumia cited 2008 election when Ghanaians voted against the NPP as an example of how the NDC, according to him, ruined the good work of ex-President John Agyekum Kufuor. He's calling on Ghanaians at Swame to give President Kufuor another opportunity to lead the country. Mahmoud Mohamed Nuruddin reports.
The Vice President was speaking at Swami constituency in the Ashanti region, where he urged residents to vote massively for the party to continue what they have started.
National health insurance, free maternal care, national youth employment, school feeding program, LEAP program, metro mass transit. When you know, President Kufuor or Mane MPP, ABC Ghana, Mputujuma na Oye. Over free abiding, you can't Ghana for say,
National Health Insurance Scheme, free maternal care, national youth employment, school feeding program, LEAP program, metro mass transport. All these intervention programs were initiated by kind courtesy of President Kufuor and the NPP government. When he was leaving government, we told Ghanaians not to change NPP government and allow Nanado to continue, but they did not. We brought NDC back to government for 8 years. We slept in darkness for 5 years, which has collapsed many businesses. the Mahama administration could not pay national health insurance. The card wasn't functioning. The ambulance service collapsed. Teacher training allowance and nursing training allowance were scrapped. Arabic instructors allowance was truncated. There were no jobs due to IMF program. Nurses were unemployed after graduation. Common chalk in our schools was a challenge because we had changed a government and the new government sent us backward. We go back and forth instead of going ever forward.
Arabic instructors allowance. This is a very IMF program. Now, nurses to me, nursing training, nobody in a field. We are talking school. Now I am problem. Now I assistant abai. Now abba. There the akwe. Yekweli kakra there sandwich. Yenta kweli
Dr. Baumia also told them not to forget to vote for their Member of Parliament, Oseche Mensah-Bonsu, who is bringing development to the constituency.
Because 4 hospitals,
in fact, this constituency is very lucky because you have 4 hospitals being built here. One at Magazine, one at Kronum by GNPC. We are introducing one district, one hospital initiative. Therefore, there will be one hospital here in Swami. 2,000 street lights were fixed. So there is a lot of development underway. For that matter, you are in good relationship. Never change the relationship with the Kukwado, the Honorable Che Mensah-Bonsu. Vote them. They are number 1 on the ballot paper.
Well, America is voting, and so are we preparing to do on December 7. And as the country prepares for what will be a very crucial election, leaders of the 2 main parties, the NPP and NDC, are being urged to commit to peace and whip their supporters in line. The National Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons is therefore urging politicians to resolve their differences through dialogue and not armed conflict. They're embarking on the Ballots Without Bullets campaign to sensitize the nation against the use of weapons. The campaign started in the Ododo constituency here in Accra. Take a look at more in this report by Kwikwa Sante.
As political tensions in some areas of the country rises ahead of this year's crucial election, many stakeholders have raised concerns about the possibility of violent clashes between supporters of the NPP and NDC. Indeed, a little over a week ago, supporters of the NPP and NDC in the Ododo constituency in Accra clashed violently, leading to injuries and destruction of properties. The National Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons is embarking on a campaign and engaging the various political party leaders in selected hotspots identified by the police and urging them to commit to peace. The Ballot Without Bullets campaign by the Commission is a call on political parties to use dialogue and not violence to resolve their differences. Here is Jones Bote Aple, Executive Secretary of the Commission, explaining to JoyNews the reasoning behind the campaign.
We want to counter ballots without bullets. We don't want people to die as a result of elections. We want people to live and live peacefully after the elections. And so this program is attitudinal and behavioral change. We want to change people's perception about elections. And when we go for election, it's about electing leadership. It's not about fighting. It's about who presents his ideas and the one that you prefer. So it's just a message that everybody is calling. And so we have come to Dodo because of what happened recently here. The point is that if we don't get to the constituencies to have an engagement or conversation with the candidates, as we all know, there's no war in this world that ended through the bullets.
Well, let's cross over to the United States of America, find out what is happening currently. We're connecting with a Ghanaian there. Joining me now is Ransford Gisam, who's Doctor of Pharmacy in Maryland. Hello, Doc.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for your time. Let me ask you about the atmosphere? I mean, how is it? How does it feel right now? How do people feel about what's happening? Then we can get to the candidates involved.
I tell you, everyone is really excited here in the U.S. about the elections, and we're seeing really, really great numbers. Here in Maryland, we have about 4.1 million voters that are registered. By Sunday, there were about 2.3 million people that had already cast their votes. So that alone tells you how excited people are to go out and vote.
Let's talk about the two candidates. I mean, how do people feel generally about him? We know, of course, that Donald Trump has a base of, if you like, mostly white Americans. We also know that Joe Biden is the one that's pushing the agenda and saying that if you vote me because we haven't been able to properly deal with coronavirus under Donald Trump. We can deal with immigration better, etc. How do people feel about these two people and the sort of what they are offering to the people of America?
Right. So yes, these two candidates pretty much offer two divergent views, and especially with immigration, Donald Trump, has been called a racist by so many people because of some of his policies, punishing some of these sanctuary cities where there are a lot of immigrants that are, offered accommodation, offered a better choice of living. So, I mean, Donald Trump is seen as the racist person. I mean, that's not my view, but that's the perception that's out there that, Donald Trump leans more towards the white supremacy and does not give so much opportunities to the blacks or the immigrants. So, I mean, with Trump's campaign of hope, Biden's campaign of hope, he's encouraging people, especially the blacks, to go out and vote, pretty much because there are so many policies that he touted, especially helping families that are separated. We recently saw how there are so many families that were separated at the border, and mothers being left outside to just stay by themselves, and then their kids, they don't even know where they are. So there are so many things on immigration that especially the blacks are so excited about voting. In 2016, we saw a low turnout, especially among the blacks. But this year, they are so excited. They just couldn't wait for the 4 years to come, and they are so much enthusiastic about voting. The other thing is also about the handling of the pandemic. So we've all seen how President Trump keeps fighting with the scientists, always has divergent views. Whenever the scientists say something about the virus and how to go about it, he chooses his own way of tackling it, and anyone who doesn't see eye to eye with him, he pretty much tries to push away. So it's just a lot of differences between these two people that hopefully by end of day we'll see how it's going. As of now, I feel like it's too close to call. There are so many people that are rooting for both candidates, and especially in some of the toss-up states as Arizona, in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania. These are places that you don't even know who is going to win in these places.
Well, hopefully we'll find out sooner than later. But you talked about coronavirus, which of course is a very big issue as far as this election is concerned. So I won't spend too much time on that. But one thing also that has come to play is police brutality against people of color. And I know it's a big deal for especially for black or African Americans or black people in general, even if you're not originally African American.
Right.
What does this election mean to people like that, including yourself?
So, I mean, including myself, I see this as a chance of correcting so many wrongs. Recently, there was a video that circulated worldwide that everyone saw about the police killing George Floyd. It's happened so many times. And the policies are just not in place. And so this is an election that Biden is offering hope. Biden seems to be offering hope to many black people that when he comes in, he's going to change a lot of things. And I'm sure his message is really sinking in, because currently Donald Trump has been seen as what empowering the white supremacists. Recently, there was a shooting in Wisconsin. He got the opportunity to condemn the perpetrators, but he rather seemed to empower them with what he said, you know. So basically, Biden is really getting all the shots. He's getting all the shots in this regards. And there are a lot of people who feel like when he comes in, he'll be able to do something better than we're seeing right now. And I mean, for some, it's just like in the absence of good, bad is better, because they feel like Biden has been there. And that's something that Trump has been saying, that Biden has been there in the presidency, even though he wasn't the president, he was a vice president, and he had a chance to change a lot of these things, but he did not. But Biden is also saying that, you know, we did a lot of things to change things, but because I wasn't in the helm of affairs, this time when I come in and being the president, I'll be able to change a lot of things. And that's a message that is sinking into a lot of people, especially the blacks. Okay. And I believe most of them will be voting for him.
And speaking of which, Doc, I'll come back to, so we'll talk a little bit about coronavirus, because I understand you're one of the doctors on the front line. But speaking of the blacks, and you say that the message seems to be going down well with them, but do the blacks have enough, or are there enough people, voters, to be specific, who can outnumber the base or the people that believe, or the Trump supporters who would have been registered to vote?
Right. They don't necessarily have the numbers, but they can make a great impact. In 2016, there were surveys that were done, and there were a lot of people who just showed apathy. And the greater percentage of that were the blacks. So, as I said, most of them are really energized, and they've gone out to vote. We've had record numbers, and there's a lot of blacks that have already voted. Okay. And not just the blacks, but there's Hispanic votes as well. And there are certain people also who are sitting on the fence, not necessarily black or Hispanic. Some of them are still white, and they've seen a lot of things that have gone wrong with this administration, especially dealing with climate change, handling of the COVID virus. You know, so there's so much that all these other races are, you know, just jumping on board with Biden.
Is security an issue? I mean, we've heard from media organizations within the U.S. that are reporting on several measures that have been put in place, you know, to bring about some security. We understand people are even hoarding food. It looks as if people expect that there will be some kind of violence, and this is the United States of America in 2020. Yeah. How is that? How do people talk about that?
So, I mean, for myself, I've got several text messages from families, and yeah, people are hoarding food items and all that. But it's just because of some of the speeches that are coming from the president, especially with mailed-in ballots. He's realized that there are a lot of Democrats that are voting by mail, and that's something that he's really against. So his view is that if these people are going to cast their votes, they should have done it earlier by mail. And so he doesn't want some of these votes to be counted after today. And that's what is bringing the problem. And he's saying that, you know, if they're going to keep counting these votes after tomorrow, then there's going to be violence. And I don't know what he's standing on to say that. I mean, he's the president, but everyone is just cautious at this time. Everyone is really cautious. It's just because of the speeches that are coming from the president. And it's just the president that those speeches are coming from.
My final word is back to you on the coronavirus. Now, you are on the front line, I understand. I'm wondering how you feel about this particular election. What are your personal stance, you know, on this election, given that you have been at the forefront of the fight against coronavirus, and how the U.S. has dealt with it or handled it? People have said that President Donald Trump has not done very well with that.
Yes. So with the coronavirus, I mean, the things that really drive this is testing, tracing, and treatment. And currently, there are some vaccines that are in the development process. It's all about science. And what I've seen with President Trump is he tends to, believe in whatever that he wants to believe in, not to follow the science. And that's the only issue that I have with him.
Okay.
There are so many scientists that are advising him as to what to do, but especially we have Dr. Fauci, who recently fell out with him.
Because
this is one
Dr.
of the
Fauci some way somehow seems to have a bit of a soft spot for democratic positions, doesn't he?
Yes, definitely. And I mean,
so you can't really fault Trump for not really trusting his scientific.
I'm sorry?
So you can't really fault Trump for not really trusting his scientific,
Yes.
directions. Right.
Yes.
Anyway, well, we'll see how it goes, and we'll see how it ends for the people of the United States. I'm sure that will probably come back to you. But you've done a very good job with doing the journalism there for us. I think you should consider that as part of your job.
Thank you. I will. I sure will. Thank you.
Okay. I've been talking to Dr. Ransford Gisam, his doctor of pharmacy in Maryland. And as you've heard him, a lot of things that matter to the people, especially people of color, people of, Hispanic origin, etc. We'll see how it goes. Earlier here on Joy News, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, Stephanie Sullivan, talked about the electoral college that she says should not be taken for granted. She's been speaking with Israel Lai.
The votes, and there's a timetable. So one of the things I want to emphasize today is that it's going to take quite a bit of time for all the results, all the votes to be counted, and for the electoral college process to play out after the votes are counted. So people shouldn't expect to stay up all night and necessarily get the results as has happened in the past. Now, the governors of each state will certify the results of the votes when they're counted, and then the electors will cast their votes, and the results will be communicated to the Congress. And all of this plays out over weeks and months, culminating in the inauguration at noon on January 20th of whomever is elected president. This kind of glossing over, I can go into more detail if you like, because it is confusing, but I will just say that any candidate or political party ignores the importance of the Electoral College at their peril.
All right, so we're expecting that if you have 270 electoral college votes, then you're going to be the winner. But you're also saying that it's going to take us quite a bit of time before we get to know who the eventual winner is. Is that correct?
Right, and that's not so much because of the Electoral College, although that's always been in place, but it's more related to the fact that there's so many votes that have already been cast early because of the pandemic, largely, and also for convenience, et cetera. So already there are about 95 million votes that have been cast, and it will take each state time to count all of those votes, as well as to count the votes that will be cast in person today. And each state has its own protocols for when they can even begin to count the votes. And some of the key states, some of the swing states where these precious electoral votes are not, let's say, a foregone conclusion because of history and expected turnout, that will take some time. So I guess I want to urge everyone patience with the process. It's time tested, and we'll see. We'll have the results when they're ready.
Stay with us here on Joy News. We'll bring you comprehensive coverage from 12 midnight right here on the Joy News channel. Let's do a very quick break. When we return, we'll talk to you about a survey conducted by the NCCE. They're telling us what will determine or will influence the vote of Ghanaians based on their survey. We'll give you the highlight and tell you why. Education, employment and health are the topmost priority for Ghanaians who are eligible and willing to vote in next month's presidential and parliamentary elections. The findings are contained in a new study conducted by the National Commission for Civic Education and released this afternoon. The report study reveals whilst a large majority of registered voters are willing to cast their ballot, 13.3% are either unwilling or have not made up their minds yet. So I'd like to take you through the report or the results from that particular report. Now, if you look at what we have there, you have 86.8% of people who are saying they are going to vote, they are willing to vote. So willingness to vote in the forthcoming presidential election, you've got 86.8% of people will see the number or the sample used for this particular survey, but 86.8% of them are willing to vote, which is, well, a good thing. But 4.3% are not voting. 4.3%, that's quite a significant a number of voters, depending on the sample that was used in this particular survey. But 8.9% of them say they are undecided. So hopefully they will join the 86.8 as we go along. Next slide, take a look at this. So they break it down. Willingness to vote in the presidential elections, we have more males. So you have 51.7% than females who have expressed their desire to vote, and you wonder how to explain that, whether or not people are more daring to declare their position. I mean, more males are daring to declare their position, as we know what happens in Ghana when you show that you are aligned to a particular party. And 48.3% of females are expressing their willingness to vote, even though there are more women in Ghana than men. Regionally, the highest figure recorded in the Upper East region of 96.1, with the lowest figure recorded in Greater Accra, which is 78.5%. So in the Upper East region, a lot more people express their willingness to vote as against what we find in the Greater Accra region. And finally, the Western region recorded the highest proportion of undecided voters, of 15.7. So it helps the NCCE itself, focus its attention. Perhaps the Western region is a place to look at, since they have the highest number of people who are unwilling to vote. Now, a policy framework aimed at addressing health threats at the human-animal environmental interface in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic is expected to be laid before the next Parliament in 2021. This was made known to the media at the launch of the International One Health Day here in Accra by the management of the multi-sectoral institution, the head of Virology Department at Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research, Professor William Ampofo, who chaired the occasion, stressed on the importance of the policy, which is said will impact positively on the health of the nation.
The One Health policy is a very critical document, and we will be very happy if this document is ratified and becomes the proper framework to push One Health work in Ghana. Indeed, COVID has shown us that the agencies can work together effectively. There is a presidential task force chaired by the president himself, which has all the key members, all the key departments and agencies coming together frequently to look at this issue of health. And the second point I'd like to make is that the environment has been very key in our response to COVID. We're supposed to wash our hands regularly. We're all wearing masks to ensure that there is the air, the ventilation that we share is not infectious.
Well, that'll be all for now. Like I said, I asked you to send in your messages. Let me take one and then we go on. This one says, the findings from the OSP vindicates the position of our gallant minority that there was some huge corruption in the deal. This is sent by Lord Brilliant from Tamale. Let's do this again tomorrow. This morning is at myjoyonline.com. I am Gifty Andra.